What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man, and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics. We are back. After weeks of telling stories, JD and Kory are back. Good to have you back, Doctor.
Thank you, Kory. Great to be back with you. Looking forward to this episode.
Indeed. Before we get started, let me get to do the shout out. Hold on. Jeez. Let me do the shout out to VPR Radio. VPR Radio. Thank you. Kiana the Goddess and DJ FMI. We couldn't do this without you. Tune in. Listen to what the people are talking about. You'll learn about hip hop culture. You'll learn about what's happening on the ground in New York City in an hour with amazing guests and a lot of fun talk between Kiana and DJ FMI.
Yes. And since we're doing shout outs, I just want to shout out a listener. I hope she's still listening, but Patty Barron has sent us some nice feedback from the first few episodes. And Patty, thank you for listening. And I know this might not have been exactly, your topic of choice at one point, but it's been great feedback to hear from Patty that she's enjoyed this. So just want to send a shout out to her.
A couple of quick shout outs for me as well. My friend Justy, thanks for listening. And my friend JP, thank you also for listening. The more you listen, everyone, and the more you leave feedback, the better we can do to improve Same Difference.
Yes.
This week, we're going to talk about community and how it affected each of us. You've heard some stories about what the role of community was in our lives. This time, you get to dig a little bit deeper, and maybe, just maybe, it'll resonate for you, and you'll start to understand how much we have in common. JD, please take it away.
I think for me, U City was interesting in the dynamic of being kind of 50% white, 50% African American, although probably more like 49, and a couple of percentage Asian. When we first moved, when I was growing up, I should say. And so the dynamic, though, was that it, even though it seemed like it was the most diverse place in St. Louis, there was this still divide. The further south you went, the wealthier and whiter it was. And as you went north, the less wealthy and blacker, the population was. And there was two major streets that ran through U City, Delmar and Olive. And in St. Louis, Delmar is known as the dividing street between white on the south and black on the north. It's called the Delmar Divide, literally known as that. And it goes downtown through University City, which is University City is placed directly directly west of the city of St. Louis,
All right.
certainly in the middles.
So you've talked a couple of times, you might have mentioned it vaguely, that you are proud to be from U City. The
Yes.
reason why is precisely that balance, precisely
That balance, that ability to, because of how segregated St. Louis is, you wouldn't be surprised necessarily, but it is somewhat surprising. And this happens all over, how people get attached to their neighborhood so much that they don't even want to go and experience, because we're such a fear-driven society. They don't even want to go outside, right? People in the inner city, even though we hear about how much violence is going on in the inner city, people in the inner city would be scared to come to the county because of the police brutality potentially, or at least even just being locked up and put into the system because of the policing that went on. And whatever it was, they just didn't want to get the accused by the Karens or whatever kind of situation. So to them, at least knowing what the type of things that they had to avoid in their own neighborhood and being comfortable with what they knew, people are not really traveling as much. In U City, we experienced such a melting pot, even though it's kind of a melting pot, and you get to experience the different, you get to see that as you go throughout your day, you get more comfortable that, or at least even, people purposely moved to U City so that they could be around diversity, like my parents did. You think that that's the way it is outside, right? Like, so many people after writing my book that I talked to that grew up with me who were African American, also said, I didn't know it was racist till I went to college. Like, that's how much of an experience of a melting pot that we had, being there. And yes, the majority of the schools was Black and students, and so you still saw it, but you didn't really feel it until
Mhm.
you left. But it also gave us this idea that we could go anywhere, that we were safe going into the deep parts of the county, the deep parts of the city, and it didn't quite matter as much. So it was that sense. When I was growing up, part of what was interesting, I grew up in between Del Mar. I grew up closer to Del Mar, but in between Del Mar and Olive. And so that was really where the melting pots were. In between those two was definitely much more of, and I shouldn't say melting pots. I'll use, oh Lord, Jane Elliott's salad mix, right? There was definitely more of a mix for us. And so we had white neighbors, Black neighbors, they got along great, and we're very happy to be neighbors, even if they didn't send their children to the same school as one another.
Did all the parents look out for all the kids?
At least amongst my parents and our neighbors, yes. And it was still different, right? Like, my dad, well, you know what? I would say their methods were different. My parents weren't into spankings, or whoopings. My friends' parents were into spankings and whoopings, much more on the whooping side. And I got to hear that. I also got my friends in trouble at a very young age because they couldn't talk to their parents the same way I could talk to mine, and they realized that after getting the whooping. But I also was over at my best friend's grandmother's house, and we were playing tabletop football. I don't know if you guys played that with the little triangle.
Yeah.
And I'm playing it and I hit it and it almost stayed on and I was about to score my little touchdown and then it fell off the table and I went, damn. And she said, Jesse, I heard that. I don't know what you can get away with at your place, but here, that doesn't work. You understand? I'm going to handle it my way if I hear that again. And I was like, yes, ma'am. I probably was the most pale I was at that moment that I could be. And I was like, yes, ma'am. And I learned quickly, oh, I can control my language if I truly have enough fear inside of me to do so. And, so that threat in that sweet grandmotherly voice was all I needed to hear, partly because I had heard my friend getting his ass whooped before. My dad, he spanked me, probably would be the better term, with his hands a few times and stopped, especially when he had daughters, and then he didn't believe in that anymore. I used to complain to my parents they didn't whoop me enough as I got older. And, but they did discipline. My dad would come to the park where my friends were playing basketball and cuss them out like they were his sons. And, it would be other black folks at the park playing basketball going, yo, do we need to step in and whoop this dude's ass? And no, let that shit go. Right. And so when we got in trouble, yeah, my dad he could make you feel bad and cuss you the fuck out quick and do so in this very lawyer-like manner too, where he could ask you a bunch of questions and then you're telling on yourself before you knew it and you're like, damn, how the hell did I even get here? and right, like we used to have a saying between my sister and I, like his last question would be, well, that was pretty stupid, don't you think? And be like, yeah, now that you made me go through that whole scenario. Exactly. Right. But there was that definite sense of community in our side of things. I remember when there was a couple that was a mixed race couple, one Asian, Japanese, and one white woman, and then there was a white kid, and me and Shondo got into it with those two, and all four groups of the parents kind of came together at our house, had us sat down and yo, you guys got to be friends, you got to treat each other right, you can't do this silly shit. And literally we ended up having a gathering at the house the rest of that day, right? Like hanging out, watching TV, the grown-ups in the other room talking. And so, yeah, we had that experience growing up, and I definitely appreciate how all of that went down.
Were there any parts as you got further south, or were there any parts as you got further north where you did not feel safe, or you felt you were a little bit out of your orbit of community?
In St. Louis or U City? In St. Louis. In St. Louis, yeah, you didn't want to go down to Jefferson County. That was not where you wanted to have a tan at for us, right? And we didn't have any reason to go down there. So South County was where Jefferson County is. South County was the lower income status white folks, typically more so than West County. And West County was also a higher population of Jewish population. That's where my dad's parents were at. That's where a lot of the country clubs are at. That's where, like the wealthier stayed in that sort of middle western kind of part of St. Louis. And North County was had its middle and lower income class groups, and it was predominantly a Black neighborhood. Now, the migration of St. Louis was we were recognized as the kind of kings of white flight. So Black folks moved into the city, originally redlined into a certain area of the North. White folks moved to North County. Black folks moved to North County. White folks moved out to St. Charles County and out west, and are still doing that even further and further and right now. But that wasn't, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it was because there was so much love shown to me in a Black community, in my friends' families, that I didn't know any better. Like my Black friends said, they didn't know it was racism out there until they left high school. I would not have felt uncomfortable in a predominantly Black, like, I say this halfway jokingly, but looking in the mirror sometimes, is a shock at times, because I don't know how I don't recognize how I look sounding the way that I do. And I didn't until I met this Asian couple when I was living in LA, and they grew up in Inglewood and Compton, I believe, right? Between the two of them, and then ended up being together. And they sounded same type of lingo as I did. And here it is. One was, I want to say even Chinese or some, and the other was Filipino. And
right.
And when I saw them and saw how natural it was for them to speak in, what you would call Ebonics or slang or whatnot, and even just talk naturally about their culture in a way that you could tell they grew up around a bunch of Black folks, I was like, oh, that's how I look. I didn't, because I've tried to, even talk to myself in the mirror and be like, it don't look as funny to me. But when I see it, when I'm shocking people, when, it is different. Right. And I forget that, especially when I'm meeting new Black folks, because I might say something and they're like, whoa, who the hell are you? And what are you doing here?
Right.
And so, yeah, U City just made us comfortable. I can't explain it any differently than that. Then it just really made us comfortable. And I think I got the difference between what my community was like when I would go visit my dad's parents, especially, but both my grandparents, they both lived in more well-to-do communities.
So tell me about your visits to your grandparents then.
So on my dad's side, and I've spoken about him in a previous episode, we would go to sports games together to kind of avoid the topic of, but he would invite me to bring friends out, and I would bring my friends out. And I remember, both my grandparents went to attended different country clubs, and my friend would come with me when we would go to dinner at those country clubs, and he matched the staff, skin tone, right? And I didn't know it was going to be uncomfortable for my grandfather, because I'm a kid, until it was uncomfortable for my grandfather.
Can you tell me about that?
Of course, I don't know how it is in Iowa City. St. Louis has a political racism, and what I mean by that is we pretend, we say all these, terms to not say black or white, right? Urban and all of those things that
Mhm.
become, synonymous with black and white. Um, Whereas we talked to a friend of mine talked to somebody in Houston one time, and they were like, I don't think St. Louis is more racist than Houston. And we're like, yeah, but do they pretty much acknowledge it? Because I met people from Houston that came to St. Louis and was like, damn, it's racist over here. And I'm talking about white folks that came. And
Right.
it was easier because in the South, it's kind of almost like more comfortable. So you get to just be that, and it was okay. And in St. Louis, you don't know it as much. So I would have to decode how my parents' friends were, my grandparents' friends were talking to them about, oh, you know, this is your family. Oh, yeah, you went to U City. Oh, really? So it's nice of you to invite your friends, your uh, grandson's friends to the thing, and you could just kind of see this unnatural awkwardness in conversation. And what made you bring them here, or kind of things. And I just remember that, and I remember my parents and I talking to the staff that was serving us in a very comfortable manner, and they feeling, I could tell that they felt a little more relaxed, like their shoulders would drop even some at times in talking to us, versus how they had to behave around the rest of them. And it was just, you get the stares. There's a whole lot of people staring at you, and so you felt like you were Nelly, but you weren't popular. You just were being looked at.
Was your friend Shando that you took to the country club?
Shondo, yeah.
Shando. Did he talk to you about what he felt at any point during the club visit, the country club visit?
I almost need to even ask him now if he remembers how he felt. Um, I think we would talk a little bit about the awkwardness. We Part of us just growing up was we saw people's behavior as their problem and not ours, and so it didn't really affect us until we became adults, especially, right? Like we had a saying growing up, that his brother's crew would tell us, and it would be, that ain't on us, that ain't on me, right? You want to be racist, you want to be uncomfortable, that ain't on me. You want to talk about it, we'll talk about it all day long. Let's get past it. Let's go through it. But that ain't on me. And so I think that's kind of how from what recall now, it was much more about that. Like, man, they can be that way. That ain't on us. We're going to go and enjoy the pool. I don't care if everybody gets out when we get
Mm,
in, right?
mm.
And so that was more or less how we would approach that kind of thing.
So, in some respects, if I'm hearing you correctly, you were safely able to see out from underneath the umbrella of your grandfather's protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice.
And my mom's parents, they were much more inclusive and not caring about my friends. Now, her father passed away when I was in the 10th grade, which was earlier and he was sick for the last couple of years. But as like young children, they took me and Shondo everywhere, Six Flags, all kind of stuff, out to eat. They loved how he would crack jokes. And I remember them. I remember the first time I heard my grandfather speak of the difference between us and them, and it shocked the crap out of me. And so in their house, which was a rather large, I want to say 5 bedroom, if not 6 bedroom home, and they had a library underneath. And the only air conditioned rooms in this central air type of way was the library and the master bedroom. The rest of the house was not air conditioned. And so we would go into the library. I would play chess with my grandfather. He would kick my ass in chess and tell me, like, you don't want to do that, and I would do it anyway. And he would say, this why, click click click. But when Shondo and I were running in and out of there, and we left the door open, he made a comment like, they just don't get it. And I was like, damn. And he was talking about Shondo and they being black folk, kind of like. And the way he said it, I was still young, so I don't remember the exact words, but I do remember certainly the message. And I was shocked because he had been so open and inviting to us, right? And he, very successful attorney. I mean, his name is still on one of the largest law firms, and certainly the largest in the Midwest, if not one of the largest in the United States still. But he said these things, even though, you know, my grandmother would have never said that. She was the most unassuming, just accepting of us all. On my mom's side, I mean, Mimi, we could do no wrong by her, and yeah, I mean, we could do wrong, but she would still accept us for, you're still loving kids. Something, you made mistakes or you made bad choices or whatever. Maybe you could learn from that kind of thing. Right. And she just loved Shondo. If he said, you know, I'm on a seafood diet, I seafood and I eat it, they busted out laughing. So that was they were very, very welcoming to my friends. Even her sister, you know, I would bring other friends by, and my mom's side of the family was much more welcoming.
Nice. Wow. So tell me, how would your 4th of July, your big holidays, work in this community? Did everybody get together and everybody did kind of like a block party? Was there a giant UC party?
I wish. There was definitely block parties at times, but the parties, my mother would love to host people, and so, you know, we'd have my friends' families, the different neighbors of different ethnicities come through. Like I said, the housekeepers were always invited, and their families. So it was a very big mix when my mom kind of led the way on the parties. And, you know, my dad participated, but it was really her pushing that social interaction. And hers were more, I guess, some around birthdays, but much more around events. So Jesse did this. Kaya, or Jenny at the time, my sister, did this. You know, let's throw these parties. The more of the holiday kind of parties were much more at Shondo's family's house. Like, you know, we, after the LA gang started claiming city streets, and, you know, this is 108th and Hoover, this is 100 and such, this is, so U City took on some of that, and 8 Deuce was a big gang kind of area. We grew up on the 7200 block of Colgate, at Shondo's house, where I first moved to, before moving out, and we claimed 7 Deuce for our little street name, and right, and so much so that Grandma and the whole aunts and uncles and all of them got into it, even though, Mike and Shondo started that, to the point where on July 2nd was the bigger holiday than July 4th because it was Seven Deuce Day. And it was a huge party at the house for Seven Deuce Day. And so we got to experience that. And that was really a good time. Right.
Oh, it's warming, man. That really is heartwarming.
Yeah. So Iowa City.
Yes, sir.
What was community like for you growing up?
Well, so we can take a look at that in any number of ways. It's kind of like a layer cake.
Okay.
So
pick a layer.
Well, I previously talked about the public library and how that was a central part of the community, at least for us. There was also church, and I belonged to the same church that my mom and dad went to, and the joke was, well, we are Presbyterians, and the joke was we would have been Lutherans if we did turned left, but since we turned right, we were Presbyterians. There were two churches, and we had a choice, left or right. Dad turned right, and we were Presbyterians. As it stands, as was most of the time, we were the only Black family in a lot of different spaces. That's not to say that there weren't other Black families here.
Right.
We had some contact with them, but it wasn't as though we were all that we were great friends and going over to each other's homes all the time. Interactions were all very, very planned. There were very few people just dropping by the house. There was always advanced notice, and we had to be on our best behavior. And again, a lot of it was proper for the time that we as children would be seen and not heard and not seen too much, because the grown-ups were talking, and the grown-ups would talk in the living room, which was a special room. And yes, there were yes, go ahead.
Were the grown-ups the other Black grown-ups in the neighborhood, or were these often white and Black?
The visits would be white and Black. My godparents lived 2 doors down, and they were also Black. Their children were older than I was by a good bit. My family is kind of a split level ranch family. There's 2 kids, and then there's a space of 10 years, and then there's 2 more kids, and I'm the youngest. So I always had a playmate, my older sister, who's 3 years older, and my older 2 siblings were each other's playmates. They were 2 years apart. They're in their late 60s, early 70s right now. And my 3 older siblings are all baby boomers, and I am a Generation X. So in some respects, like, we were raised differently, and as such, the values and sometimes even the communication is entirely different. I would always be able to go over to my godparents' house, and they were the Coopers, wonderful people, and they would look out for me. Whenever, if I needed anything, when mom was working, after dad died, I could always go over there. They were just very solid people. In terms of extended community, you were talking about your grandparents. My grandparents lived 8 hours away 6 to 8 hours away in southern Illinois. So the very southern tip of Illinois is where my dad's grandparents were. And sometimes my maternal grandmother would be there as well. And So I grew up in Iowa City, and my cousins were elsewhere. So I wasn't seeing them on any sort of regular basis. And it was always a journey to go to Southern Illinois from Iowa City, because you're taking two squirrely kids uh, in a car and trying to have them stay um, entertained for that period of time. We had a travel trailer and a Dodge 1974 Dodge Monaco station wagon, 444 barrel engine, 21 feet, 4,500 pounds of rolling steel. It was huge. It was powerful. It was a boat. And once you got it up to 80 miles an hour, it would just roll. And we would be pulling a 22 to 25 foot travel trailer behind us. That was one of Dad's joys, to take us and see the countryside, whether that was with the trailer or without the trailer. On Sundays, we would often go out for a drive throughout rural Iowa. And I always felt very safe because Dad was a substantial man. Dad was about 6 foot, 265, 270. He was big man. And he was very strong. And I never felt unsafe with him. I mean, big dude. And
Right.
I would think that my father was big, and then I would see my grandfather down in Southern Illinois, and my granddaddy Tom, was 6'4". He was about my height, but much bigger, and he had that country strength. Here's an anecdote about him. Well, after Dad had died, I went down to Southern Illinois with my mama, and I'd been lifting weights, and I had a couple hairs on my chin, and I challenged Granddad to an arm wrestling match.
Okay.
And I locked up, put my hand up. He put his hand up around mine, and my hand disappeared. And I've got big hands. And I knew I should have just shut up. But no, something in me, my ego, had me a little chirpy. And I said, "Come on, Granddad, I've been lifting weights. Let's go." He looked at me and said, "All right, boy." I threw everything I had into it, veins popping out on my forearm, up my arm. Bam! He knocks me down real quick. Can't believe this. Come on, let's do it again. Bam! I lock up even faster the second time. I said, okay. And I know I've lost 2 out of 3, but we're going to do this one more time because I can take it. Wow. There my knuckles hit the table, and he says, "Now go on back to your mama." I didn't know Granddad could rank or anything like that, but he straight up roasted me. And this is in mid 80s or early 80s. The thing was, they had that country strength, and they ate country food. And if you don't know what that means, they worked all day, sun up to sundown. They ate 3 really strong, rich meals, and they were strong people. My grandparents, when I was born, had to have been in their, oh geez, they were in their 70s when I was born as their grandbaby, the last of their grandbabies. They were in their 70s. And it was a treat to see them. They always treated us so well. And my grandmother Edith, that was my paternal grandmother, she was delightful. There was always food ready for whenever you showed up. They'd know we were coming, and the food would always be ready and hot when we got there. And Grandmother Edith always would make, this is my favorite cake of all time. It was a yellow cake, 3 layers with white coconut and pineapple frosting.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man. That was one of those that you wish you would have gotten the recipe and heard all the stories and all of that, because when they sat down and they talked, that sense of belonging, maybe I didn't belong in that room because of the topics, but I felt I had a place and these were my people. And when you have that moment, it's so powerful, because as we've talked about, representation matters, but having that sense of belonging, these are my people. I loved all that. Now, as you know, I'm a storyteller. I just wish I had been wise enough as a child, and that's really foolish on my behalf, to have captured all those stories.
Right.
To have captured all those stories. I was lucky enough when I was a little boy. It was in the early 70s. My great grandmother, Augusta, lived with my paternal grandparents, and she was in her 90s when I was a little kid. So that meant she was born in the 1800s.
Right.
Even at the tail end, I knew someone who was born the 2 centuries ago.
Right.
Okay. And the stories that must have developed, well, heck, for that matter, my grandparents were born in the previous century too. So, yes, there we go. I knew a number of people. And to think that, to think those stories are real and genuine, it's not that long ago, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
Now, Olmsted was small, and I mean small. I had an uncle, I had 2 uncles down there, and a couple of cousins. I had my uncle Paul and my aunt Lola and my cousins Marcia and Pam and a cousin Nellie. And we had a whole bunch of cousins down there, but I didn't know them, because when you're under 11, what you're thinking about is playing. Heck,
Right.
when you get to 13, you still want to play, but you're starting to get weaned toward the grown-ups table. I wish I had gotten to know those cousins more.
And these cousins lived in Homestead near your grandparents?
Oh, they lived down all around there. I remember
Right.
when we went to my grandmother's funeral down there. I remember walking into either the funeral home or the church and seeing all shades of Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my cousins who had come down from Gary, Indiana, my auntie Eileen's son, said, all these people are your cousins. And I'm just standing there kind of scared, like, oh my gosh, those are all your cousins who are related to your grandmother, to grandmother Edith. That's all fam. And to this day, mostly because of my inactivity, I haven't dug out those family contacts and said, hey, we have the same grandmother.
Right.
Or not necessarily grandmother. Her or you know, I guess it would have been her mother. Yeah, we all have the same great grandmother. I'll say it like that. Yeah, yeah.
I think what's interesting about your story for me is that Shondo's grandmother's house was kind of like, that house, like his family, uncles, aunts, they lived in St. Louis, if not U City, or if not even in that house with them. And and so cousins amongst cousins, right? Generations of cousins, I got to experience life in his family much, and closeness to his cousins more than I got to spend with mine, who had
Mm,
all, the aunts and uncles had all moved out.
yeah.
We were the only family on my mom and my dad's side that lived in St. Louis near my grandparents. I, and it's interesting because my parents wanted to raise me around Black folks, that it's like it was more natural for them to even be around their parents versus, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The joy of it was I wanted to play with toys. And as I think back, there are some memories that are just coming up now of my dad and mom, Aunt Eileen, and my cousin James Williams, Uncle Paul, um, Uncle Alonzo, um, and Aunt Lola, maybe Marcia and maybe Marcia and Pam. But the grown-ups would sit around and it would be later at night and we'd need to be going to bed, but they'd stay up and talk. And I yearn for those stories of belonging and understanding who am I
Mhm.
and what are our stories. Black folks in America often lost their records and their heritage because of slavery, because a lot of times, and further, a lot of times, our information wasn't as important to keep records on. So the oral tradition of passing stories down generation to generation was so important. And do they take on near mythic proportions? Yeah, sometimes they do, but that's part of who we are. That's part of
Mhm.
who we are. And when you don't have your stories, you're adrift.
Right.
And you are just kind of out there searching for, and again, belonging. Where do I come from? Who am I? And those are questions that are universal, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's an interesting difference in cultures at
Hmm.
times. Like we, part of us, we get to know, oh, I'm Italian, I'm British, I'm this, I'm that, I'm no. But there's also this big individualistic portion of our culture that keeps us separated. Like when I went over to my friend's house, the uncles would treat the nephews and nieces as their children.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
My uncles and aunts still, they would offer us food or whatever. If we come to their house, they would treat us, but it was very much like Larry, Joan, them your kids. And that was just a cultural thing, right? Like you you could just see sort of that more, and as I started to get older and met, people from India, the aunts and uncles were other parents,
Right.
right? The great aunts and uncles were other grandparents.
Hmm.
So you just see that level of holistic family versus ours, very cut and not so inclusive.
It's funny you should talk about the individualistic versus the collective. When I was when I was a little kid and I would be back in Olmsted or Mounts, if I acted up, any adult could discipline me.
Right.
And I might be acting up and somebody be like, "Are you James's boy?" I'm like, "Uh-huh, I don't know you." "Oh, I know your father." And when I would hear that, I would think like, I can't do anything right. I can't do anything wrong. And I'd get disciplined. And then as soon as they would come and tell my dad or my mom, I'd get disciplined again.
Again.
when we have that kind of unit, I think part of the reason why I think you see the move toward individualism is because there have been individuals who have ruptured the membrane of trust in that community such that you don't touch my kid, don't you put your hand on my kid because I'm not having it. I'm just not having it. I don't know you, whatever. But then again, that's that that whole sense of community. We're no longer this community body. We are a bunch of individuals inhabiting the same space. For example, I'll take this one, bring it home a little bit. uh, my eldest son Xavier went to Iowa City West High like I did, and I my junior year we had a brand new principal. That was the class of 84, 85. No, yeah, he came in 83, 84, and he was young. Dr. Argenbright, great guy. He was young, very young when we got to him. And then what happened was, oh, let's see here, 28 years later or thereabout, he has, let's see, no, I had Xavier. In 2009, my little boy, Xavier, starts attending West High. And the moment we walk in, Dr. Argenbright says, "Hello, Kory." Or, no, "Hello, Mr. May. How are you?" And I said, "I'm well, Dr. Argenbright. This is my son, Xavier." "Pleased to meet you, Xavier." "Mr. May, I'll keep an eye on him." Dr. Argenbright walks off and Xavier says, "I'm not going to be able to get away with anything, am I?" Nope, not at all. When Xavier graduated, Dr. Argenbright retired. And I've got to tell you, that was a long time. That was a long time. It was 31 years that he had been the principal there. And in that time, 2 generations of us. That's what community felt like to me, right?
Right.
That he knew me on sight after not having seen me since graduation of 1985. And then to see me with my son, and I know I could trust him with my son, and my son moves into this community and he is cared for. Wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong, but he was cared for, and that to me was so important.
What's the population of Iowa City?
Oh,
roughly. You don't have to be exact.
With students in all the surrounding areas, probably 100,000.
Wow.
But it wasn't that big. Going on 40 years ago, it was smaller, far less diverse, far less diverse. A lot of people moved to Iowa City for their affiliation with the university.
Right.
Got a lot of students that come here, and it's also, I'm going to rep Iowa City for a minute here.
Please.
It's a UNESCO City of Literature, and one of the things about that is the University of Iowa has an amazing creative writing program, master's program, that's world renowned. And we do literature really well here. So people come from all over the world to get involved in the program. Some of the folks that have been here, the Russo brothers, who were directors for the Marvel movies, like Avengers, the Avengers movies by Marvel. There's a whole slew of other folks there, but those are big names for big movies. And once you get here, it's kind of like U City in terms of it's a bubble. It's a bubble. Somebody on one of my TikToks called it the blue chapter in a very red book. So it feels on brand.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're here, there's a lot about which could be and can be improved, but there's a lot that's right. And for me, it's been home for 40 of my 56 years. And I feel an obligation to contribute to the community as well.
Right.
So, yes, this is home. This is home. This is home.
So, as we're wrapping it up, did your children stay there?
Xavier grew up here. Madeline spent some time here. Olivia, Kyle, and Zachary all have visited. But here's the thing about the visits, they're comfortable enough to feel like I can navigate around through Iowa City and not be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But they are not.
They were born and raised.
Yeah, it's not the same thing. Yeah, they were born and raised elsewhere. All my kids were born and raised elsewhere, but Xavier grew up from 5th grade. Yeah, from 5th grade through senior year in high school. And yeah, it's and as far as places to live, it's a pretty decent one. Not going to say it's perfect, but it's a decent one. And it's my community. So there. Yeah.
Well, as I hear you, I picture Andy Griffith driving around town.
45 years ago, perhaps, but no. If you should come visit sometime, or at least visit the webpage for the university, for Iowa City and the University of Iowa, and you might see that it's not Mayberry RFD, although we could probably drive to a couple places that were similar to Mayberry RFD.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know police forces are militarized now, so that's one difference for sure. But yeah, I picture this very, even the political structure, because I mean, that's twice the size as U City, like, let alone St. Louis, right? That's twice the population of U City. And so we know each other in U City. I can imagine you guys really know it's not 5 degrees of separation. If I don't know you, I know somebody that knows you.
Oh, definitely that. And what's also funny about that is it's just very easy to walk. It's very navigable. So you're going to see a lot of the same people doing the cultural things, doing the sports events, going out to the restaurants. And that works. It really, as far as I'm concerned, it works really well because, again, it creates that sense of community and everybody wants to belong in some way, shape, or form. And then we want to leave. And then at some point or another, we say, hey, wait a second. That wasn't so bad. Let me move on back. And then you do.
Well, very nice. A lovely way to end this episode. Please, if you're listening, feel free to email us comments, questions, things you would like to know at samedifferencebroadcast@gmail.com. Once again, that's samedifferencebroadcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Kory, for being a part of another episode with me, and look forward to continuing to get to know each other. Maybe we'll get to college.
I think we will. I want to thank you also. I loved your story and it just resonated with me about how you grew up. I would also admonish everyone to come visit samedifference.life. That's our
Yes.
website. And you can find out more about us, see our pictures, and we will probably both get different pictures on the website soon.
Yeah.
But you can get to know us as well. I'm thankful for VPR Radio for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Kiana, the goddess, and DJ FMI. And I am again thankful for you, Dr. JD Mass.
We are out. Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.